Okay, so Korach is the beloved Parsha of Darshanim, right? That's a famous story about the Darshan. I had one drasha only about Korach. He would go from town to town. Whatever Parsha it was, he would get up and he would like drop his pen and say, that pen went down just like Korach and his people. Speaking of Korach, but there is so much in there, and as we see so often, the keys to the Avodah we get from there is in the details. And what we're going to see tonight from the Shem Mi'Shmuel is an example how people who know all of Torah are actually able to understand what the details are telling us. First of all, they notice the details, and they know how little changes in details are part of the Torah's message. So that's what we're going to be seeing. Korach and his people came and opposed Moshe. I'll just tell you one story that I think is a very important story, and it's a little hard to figure out. There's oftentimes difficulty when you transition from one leader to another. Right? It's mentioned that when Am Yisrael, right, transitioned from Moshe Rabbeinu to Yoshua, they said Moshe Rabbeinu was like Pnei Achama, was like the sun, Yoshua was like the moon. It's very hard to go on to the next generation. So there was a certain man, a wealthy man, who was a chassid of Sfas Emes in Poland, devoted chassid many years. Sfas Emes passed away, and his son, the Imrei Emes, took over. So this man really wasn't interested in going to this young, rebbe who took over. But then he had this real, quandary in his business life. He had this real problem, and his children pushed him, and he said, why don't you go? Ask the Ger Rebbe, ask the Imrei Emes. So finally he said, fine, I'll go. He went, he introduced himself, he told him about his business problem. The Rebbe gave him some advice. He took it, and he lost the whole deal. The whole deal went right down into the karka. So he said, that's it, I'm done with this Rebbe. So at one point, there was this famous resort town in Europe, Marienbad, where people would go for the mineral baths. So he went there, and he's walking down a narrow street, and he sees the Ger Rebbe and his entourage coming right towards him. He looked there was no place to run. So the Ger Rebbe said to him, he says, why did Korach do something so stupid? Why did he decide to attack Moshe Rabbeinu and try to replace Moshe Rabbeinu? He said, because Moshe Rabbeinu sent the Meraglim, and that turned out to be a big disaster. And he didn't understand that even tzaddikim can make mistakes. And that somehow entered the man's heart, and he became a devoted chassid of the Imrei Emes. It's an important story. It's hard to figure out, but it's important to realize that. Okay, so we have Korach v'Hadassah, and Moshe Rabbeinu tells them this is what's going to happen. Right? This is how we're going to clear this up. We're going to have you take machtos, right? These firepans, and here we are. Korach and his 250 men are going to take the firepans, and Aaron is also going to be there. Each person will bring his machta, right, his firepan, and right, they will put fire, and they will put kataris, and then we will see what happens. So Hashem tells Moshe and Aaron, stay away from these people, separate from them, I'm going to destroy them. And they davened, and eventually, right, the Korach and his Eidah were all swallowed up, which is there. Now, what is with the firepans? First of all, these firepans had an interesting ending. Hashem tells Moshe, hammer them out and use them as a, what do you call it,
covering.
Like a plating. Plating is good. Right, plating for the Mizbeach, even though we'll see it wasn't really on that outside part so much, because the Mizbeach was the Mizbeach Nechoshes to start with, right? It was made with copper. And that's very strange. And that's where the Shem Mi'Shmuel takes off. So let's start with these questions.
Copper-plated copper.
Copper, well, we'll see it was a copper flooring, actually. Kind of flooring. It was on top. So the Shem Mi'Shmuel starts off with a whole stream of questions. Number one, how can something that's an Avera become a mitzvah? Right? In other words, the Mizbeach is that which brings kapara to Am Yisrael. How can you take these pans that were brought by these rebellious, sinful people and who were punished, and these things were left, and suddenly they become part of the Mizbeach? It doesn't make sense. Right? We'll get to it again a bit later. Moshe Rabbeinu's hesitancy hesitation when the women brought the Maras Atzovos, these copper mirrors, because he felt that these were used for simply adornment even for Avera type purposes. But Hashem revealed to him that they were actually very precious and they were for mitzvah. Okay, so he discovered it was for mitzvah, but the Havamina, so to speak, was if it's used for Avera, it don't go in the Mishkan. Right? That seems to make sense to us intuitively. First of all, he does explain what they covered. Now, the Mizbeach initially had dirt in the middle. Mizbeach Adom Atasali. When they would set up camp in the Midbar, so they would fill the middle of the Mizbeach with dirt, and that was, so to speak, the grill area, I guess you'd called it, where the korbanos would be. Now, what they did is they covered the dirt with these copper plate, so that the korbanos were brought on top of this copper plate. Okay, now we'll have to see. That's very strange, because the Torah gave exact instructions as to how the Mizbeach is to be built. And we know that each detail of the Kelim of the Mishkan has a purpose. And here suddenly, later on in history, because of this Korach thing, suddenly the Mizbeach is being modified. And it's taking these copper pans, the fire pans from these sinful people, and it's going on them. If it was meant to have copper on it, why didn't it have copper from the beginning? What changed in terms of this? Also, he says these were made out of copper. Now, if you look at the Kelim of the Beis HaMikdash, the Mizbeach Hazov was where the Keturis was brought. Okay, let's remember, they took copper pans and they put in their coals and they put in their Keturis, incense. The Keturis, now the Keturis was always brought on the Mizbeach Hazov, on the golden Mizbeach, the smaller inner Mizbeach. The Kelim which were used to bring the Keturis were always gold. Okay, the Kohen Gadol, when he goes on Yom Kippur into the Kodesh Kodashim, brings the Keturis in a gold pan. The coals that were brought to the Mizbeach were brought in a gold pan. Always gold. Why suddenly here, if they're being told to bring Keturis, it seems to be like a Keturis competition between Aaron and these 250 people, so why is it not according to Major League regulations with gold pans? Why copper? So here, as we said, is that the details, for those who know the details, suddenly bring out a whole message. The metals that we have, that we see in the Mishkan, so Shem Mi'Shmuel points to the Medrash, which says that Zav is Yira, is the Midah of Yira, of God-fearing. Kesef is the Midah of Ahava, right? That's even in the word Kesef, like we say in Yedid Nefesh, Nichsof, Nichsafti, I desired very much. Nechoshes, which is a really complicated word that includes many things that we see in the Torah. Nechoshes means that a person is takif bedaito. He has what's called azus, this kind of boldness, this kind of stubbornness, a kind of, I guess you would call it chutzpah. He's very strong in his opinions, and he is az kenomer, right? That's the boldness of the leopard. Now, you find description in the Tanakh of a woman who was a brazen woman, what you call metzach nechusha, right? That her forehead is like of brass. That means, right? She doesn't care what other people think. She does what she wants. So therefore, right? He says this is what we're dealing with here. The Eidah of Korach were people, so to speak, of nechushes. They were people of copper, meaning they were brazen. Again, some people translate as brass, some people as copper. Brazen comes from the word brass, which meant they were coming here, and he had a very strong opinion, and coming and saying, I don't care what you say, Moshe Rabbeinu, this is the way it's supposed to be, this is the way it should be. Okay, that was that midah of nechoshes. Now, this midah of azus can be good, or it can be bad, right? It says in Pirkei Avos that az ponim legehinnom uboshes ponim legan eden, and that's from the same Bala Mishnah who said we have to be az kanomer, we have to be bold as a leopard to serve Hashem. So this shows that we're dealing with something like high explosive. If you use it right, this midah of azus, of this boldness, is important for us to serve Hashem. But if you use it in the wrong way, straight down into Gehinnom is where it brings a person. This midah of azus. But when it's good, he says, it's the tova shebemidos. It's the best of the midos. And he says, in another combination of the three metals, Avraham is gold, Yitzchak is silver, Yaakov is nechoshes. And Yaakov, Chazal tell us, is what's called Bechir Sheba'avos. Yaakov Avinu was the one who completed that building of the three avos. That's why it uses this expression, Yaakov Asher Peda'o L'Avraham. Yaakov who redeemed Avraham. Meaning until that Yaakov Avinu's life was complete and doing what he had to, that which Avraham was chosen for in that bris didn't really become solidified. So this was why Yaakov Avinu asked that he not be mentioned in the sin of Avodas Korach. Okay? Korach, Ben Yitzhak, Ben Kahas, right? But it doesn't go up to Ibn Levi, but it doesn't go up to Yaakov. Once you go in the family tree, go to the top of the Yichus. It says Yaakov Avinu had already davened that he not be included in that. Why should he be included? Why that tefillah? Because it was his midah which was coming into play. His midah of azus, which we saw very much in his interactions with Lavan, right, where he told his wives, if he's a tricker, I can out-trick him, right, if he had that power of azus which is there, but he didn't want to be associated with their use of his midah, with his use of that azus. Okay, now, when Korach, it's interesting, his firepan was not included on the Mizbeach. Right, that Chazal learned because it says Korach and everything he had went down, and that included his firepan. These 250 people who came with him, their goal wasn't like his to attack Moshe Rabbeinu. They weren't based, he was upset as to who was chosen as the head of, right, the family of Leviim. He felt that he should have been chosen. They didn't have that. They actually came, he whipped them up. You should be able to do this avoda in the Mishkan. You should be able to do what the Kohen Gadol does. You should be able to have that closeness to Hashem, right? You are people who deserve this, who are deserving of this. Kol ha'edo kulam kadoshim. Everyone is holy b'sochem Hashem. You can do this. And they wanted to so much. And that got them to go over the boundary. That gave them this boldness, this chutzpah to do it. So on one hand, they were destroyed. And the Torah says, with these firepans, Esa'esh zrei hala. The fire that was in them, these burning coals that we used with the ketars, throw that away. But the firepans themselves, use those as this plating on the Mizbeach. Meaning, they're fire in going overboard, where they lost their sense of proportion and their sense of balance, that has to be rejected. But their actual strength, their azus of a strong desire to be close to Hashem, that was actually something positive. And you can have in one action an aspect which is negative and which is thrown away, but the positive which remains. Gemara in Sanhedrin asks, why is it Yeravam ben Nevat was rewarded to become king of Yisrael? Right? He was quite a king. He had more Shvatim than Rechavam. So they say because he did a very brave thing. That after Shlomo Melech married the daughter of Paro, so the next day Shlomo Melech was late in opening up the Beis Hamikdash. And Yeravam gave him Musar. He said, Your Majesty, this was a very bad thing. That's a very brave thing that requires that Azus doesn't go to the king and to tell him that. And they say, why was he punished? Because he chastised him publicly instead of privately. So on the same action, he received reward and he received punishment. So here, these people did something which caused them to be destroyed, which had to be rejected. But at the root, there was something positive in there. And that is something that becomes part of us and that we're supposed to remember. That's why it's there as part of the Mizbeach. That is the schar, the reward they got for their good intention. I know everyone says the road to nowhere is paved with good intentions. It's true. You have to be careful, and they definitely went downwards. Okay, but a real, sincere, true good intention shouldn't be laughed at, right? Shouldn't be, right, pushed away. So why did it have to have this change in the Mizbeach? The Mizbeach Adoma initially said that is the midah of Avram Avinu. The midah of Avram Avinu, he says, Anochi Ofar Va'efen. He says, Hashem, I am dirt and ashes. Right? Avram Avinu represents a very important aspect of korbanos, of getting close to Hashem, that has to be leiv nishbar v'nidke. You have a broken heart, Hashem never rejects that. Right? That HaKadosh Baruch Hu is with those, right, who are lowly. Karov Hashem lenishberei leiv. Hashem is close to those whose hearts are broken. But here, what they brought out into the world is an aspect that Am Yisrael needs to combine with that. On one hand, Chazal tell us that Am Yisrael are the Azim Sheba'umos. We are the most bold, the most chutzpahdik of all nations. And I heard this cute interview with some scientist who said that the Jewish midah of chutzpah helps Jews and Israelis in the world of science. Because, there'll be a statement in science like, you can only make a solar battery that can have this much energy. So the Israeli scientist goes, oh yeah? Sure, I bet not. Right? And that's how they come to so many of these different inventions. Right? So there is that aspect. Am Yisrael are Azim Sheba'umos, and they are the only ones equipped to receive the Torah, which is also called Oz, Hashem Oz La'amu Yitain. On the other hand, the signs of Bnei Yisrael, Rachmonim Baishonim Gom Lechasodim. There are people who have that Baishonos. Baishonos is not like Bashful the dwarf from Snow White who was dysfunctional. Right? Baishonos means a person who knows that they're in the presence of something which is greater than them. Right? And is very aware of where they are. So that has to be their balance. Right? That on one hand, before Hashem, like the Maral says, before HaKadosh Baruch Hu, before a person that you are supposed to be makabel from, that you're supposed to receive from, you have to have that midah of Baishonos. But Azus is that which gives a person strength. Azus, the Maral says, is even which gets a person moving. There is that type of thing that a person feels, I have the ability to get things done and I want to get them done. And that's what gets a person moving. That is a positive aspect of Azus as well. So, therefore, right, a person has to know how to mix these. The Nefesh HaChaim, on that Mishnah in Overdose about the Az Ponim LeGehenim, the person who's bold-faced to Gehenim Uboshes Ponim LeGan Eden, he brings a very nice definition. He says, we're supposed to have Azus in a positive way, but that he calls it, he says, Abirus Halev, strength of the heart, like almost the strength and nobility of the heart. It's not supposed to be on your face. He says if the Azus gets to your face, that's a sign it's the wrong type of thing. If you were showing people your face of, I'm going to do what I want, right? I know better than you, I'm this, I'm that, that's where it's wrong. It has to be inside your heart. Inside your heart, you know that you have to do the right thing, and you're not moved by the fact that other people may be laughing at you, etc. That doesn't do anything to you, right? That's how it's explained. The Ramah says this in halachas we're supposed to remember every day, that you're supposed to be azkanomer v'lo yizbayish mipnei hamal'igim olav, that you are not embarrassed in front of the people that laugh at you, right? There's a mashal the Piasetzin Rebbe gave, just updating it slightly, right? Sometimes when ladies get married and they have an engagement ring with a diamond, so they face this halachic quandary sometime, what do you do with it during the Netilas Yadayim? Okay, and there are different things. Some people have actually invented like a necklace with a little hook you can put your ring on. Some ladies put it in between their teeth, which sometimes comes to an accidental swallow, which is another problem which can get there. But many of them just put it down. So let's imagine a young couple, Motzoi Shabbos, and the husband is noticing the wife like looking all over like it's Bikas Chametz. And he says, what are you looking for? Nothing. Why are you looking for nothing everywhere? It's just something I have to find. What? She said, did you happen to see my ring? He says, what, you mean like the ring? She says, yeah. She says, I put it down on the counter, and I'd been cutting up the vegetables for the salad for Shalashudas, and I wonder maybe if it got covered by some of the vegetable peels or something, and maybe it got thrown out. He said, okay, let's look in the garbage. She says, you just took it out to the big dumpster outside. So he looks outside, he sees the big dumpster with the cats wandering on it having lava malka. But there's like $7,000 of diamond in there. So he changes his clothes and he dives into the dumpster, and this becomes great amusement in a frum neighborhood, right? Kids going all around, videos being taken to be sent around the world, and he's looking for that bag that has his kids' diapers in it, which will mean that he has hit pay dirt and the diamond must be in there someplace. So he won't be embarrassed. Rebbe says, other people don't understand. He has a diamond in there. That's why he's doing it. It's not a hobby, right? So therefore, that's a picture, he says, of the azus that a Jew is supposed to have. But that's something inside. It comes from your internal sense of self-worth and knowing what you do. And this also, I think, was with the Maras Hatzovos, with the mirrors of those women. It's true, it took a certain boldness for them to step up and to tell their husbands, don't give up. We have to bring more generations of Jews. We have a future. But that was the proper type of boldness which was there. That was that which went along with the baishonus of what a Jew is, and that's the way we're supposed to balance it. Now, obviously, where this came in another stage was in Hanukkah. Hanukkah was all about the question of Azus, because Yavon, Greece, is represented in the prophecies as a nomer, as a leopard. And that was what Greece was about, this total boldness, the sense that we know what's right and we know what you have is worthless. And Am Yisrael there had to step up to another level of Azus, where they actually took the Greeks' Azus and used that power against them. That's what Sfas Emes says when it says, Nokamtis nikmosam. Hashem led us to get revenge on our enemies. Revenge means not just that I am not defeated by you, but I take your weapons and use them against you. So that was the Azus which came into the world then, and that was another aspect of the Azus that Am Yisrael needed to put into their arsenal, so to speak, for the world of Golus, for Yavon, which led into Golus Romi, etc. But it can't come into your personal relations. It can't become something which is your personality. That's why it has to be totally lishma, right? Korach's firepan could not be put on the Mizbeach. These people did have a pure motive. They lost their sense of the boundaries of when the Torah says this is not for you, it's not for you. But there was a pure motive. The Ner Chanukah has to be pure. We light it outside, a very unusual thing for the Jew to do. The Chatchila, we light it outside because we're taking that Azus and we're saying, look at us. Our light shines in your darkness. But Osir Lishtamishman, you can't use those lights for your own purposes. It has to be pure. It has to be totally Lishma. So these are the balances we have inside of our midos. You have to know on one hand when to use Azus a bit. One of my Rebbeim once said, he says, listen, if you will push at Kiddush to get a piece of kugel, you can ask an Adam Gadol to learn with you for 10 minutes. He says, you're not embarrassed, right, to try and get in there on the table and get that piece of kugel. He says, okay, so there's a big town chacham in your community. Go over and ask him, would you learn with me even 10 minutes a week? It's embarrassing, it's something, but think of what you could get out of it if he agrees. And if he says no, okay, he says no, so it's a little bit embarrassing, but so what? It's a lot bigger than a piece of kugel. Okay, so that's where we have to know how to use those tools. I'll finish with a story. Two of you were obviously based in of the Charedis who passed away before, and he was in Belgium. So he managed to escape from Czechoslovakia on the Kinder transport. Right, this train that was going to England. He had gone. He lived in a small village outside of, I think it was Pest, right, what was called the big town there. And his parents sent him in with a letter to ask the leaders of the Jewish community there, what's going, what are we doing? And the person he brought it to said, listen, there's a train that's taking children. He says, you can get on, you can have a spot. He went running home to his parents, and he said, this is what the man said. They said, go on the train. A little boy. He went on that train. And he said, then they got to England. Many, many stories when he got to England, but he said they made this like reception where the king came, right, to kind of see these children that were saved by the English. And they were all there. They dressed them up as best they could. And then one little boy goes running up, and he runs up to the king before any guards could stop him. He grabs onto the king and he's babbling to him in Yiddish. The king's going, what is he saying? And the boy was saying, my parents are still there. They didn't get out. Could you get them out? And he told the people with him, he says, get those people out. And he said, there he learned. He said, we didn't have the chutzpah to do that. He said that boy's chutzpah saved his family. Right? He said there was something that he learned in there, that there are times when you have to not be intimidated, right, for those things, and there are times when you're supposed to realize, right, that there are true boundaries in life, and be very careful of that which is pushing you forward. It may just be ego, it may just be jealousy, right? Korach, even his wife made fun of him for, not being as good as Moshe Rabbeinu and Aaron, and that was part of what got him going, right? Because it says in the Medrash, last week we saw the Levim had all the hair on their body shaved, right, when they entered service. So Korach comes home. So first somebody meets him in the street, and he says, "Who are you?" He says, "I'm Korach." He says, "You don't look like Korach." And he comes home and his wife says, "What happened to you?" And he said, "Well, they shaved us because we're like Levim." She says, "I don't know. I saw Moshe Rabbeinu. He's looking fine. He didn't look like that." Right? And all these things. So this got him all worked up. And therefore, it was ego in these things. So a person, that's the Bali Musar always tried to see. Look, when your midos are activated, what's pushing the buttons? Where are they coming from and where is it going to? Each midah Hashem gave us can be used positively or can be used negatively. That's the avoda. And here we see that even that positive aspect which they had, those 250 men, that's something we're supposed to learn from and remain, but also to learn from their punishment, which is also there in the Parsha as well. Hashem help us walk in the right and balanced path.